is Angie Coyle, and today we're going to talk about common bad habits when playing the saxophone. So these are all common habits that I've noticed with students coming into private lessons who didn't necessarily study with a private saxophone teacher when they were starting the saxophone. Most students start out in a situation where they're in a group or a full band, where the band director is telling them how to play their instruments, how to do everything, or there's an instructor with a whole group of saxophone players telling them all how to do it at the same time. This can definitely lead to lots of bad habits being developed along the way because it's so easy to do something weird with your throat or your tongue when you don't have that one-on-one attention. So the first of these common bad habits is going to be breath tonguing. This is extremely common. I see it all the time. Breath tonguing is when you don't use your tongue to articulate the notes. You're using just your breath, kind of puffing breaths of air to get the notes out. Kind of sounds like this. So I'm not using my tongue to start those notes, just using the breath. As opposed to tonguing, it's going to sound like much cleaner start to that note, a lot easier to control. Alright, so if this sounds familiar to you, a way that you can work on this and try to break this habit, first of all, check out my tonguing video in the beginning saxophonist. That'll give you kind of all the basic tonguing information that you need to try to figure out how to tongue with your tongue. Another thing that you can do that will help a lot is to seek out a private instructor. That's going to be probably the best way to get direct feedback from somebody and just kind of work through that. But if you are not able to get a private instructor, understand they're expensive, focus on touching the tip of your tongue to the tip of the reed and just practice trying to tongue that way using your tongue. Basically, you're gonna just want to take it really slow, really focus on tonguing whenever you're playing. Try to practice easier things, music you're comfortable with, and things you can just really focus on the tonguing and nothing else. So another component of this breath tonguing issue is breath tonguing while actually tonguing with the tongue. A lot of students, when they're learning how to tongue with their tongue instead of breath tongue, they'll continue breath tonguing but just kind of tongue on top of that. So it'd be doing both at the same time, and the notes will start out clearer, but there will be just kind of like each note will be sort of emphasized, and there'll be usually like pauses between the notes, kind of sound something like there's not that consistent airflow. It's like trying to force out each note as opposed to so that, as I said before, check out my tonguing video. That'll give you some helpful tips. But a really important thing to focus on with that for any students who are, going through that after learning how to tongue, if they've just been breath tonguing, or if you have just been breath tonguing and tonguing together from the start. That's also really common. A lot of students start out like they've got the tonguing thing, but they also are like really pushing the notes out with their breath. So whichever group you're in, focus on just playing a single note, so holding out that single note and then trying to tongue. So maybe play like a G, hold it out, and then tongue a couple times on top of that. That's a good exercise for just kind of trying to figure out how to keep your air going and let each note play into the next note. Another thing you can do is practice scales slurred. So just go up and down the scale, slurring it, trying to keep everything nice and consistent, and then try the scale tonguing it and trying to keep that airflow the same. Alright, so the second common bad habit that I see all the time is inconsistent air. So that is kind of tied in with the breath tonguing on top of actual tonguing. You see students a lot playing puffs of air for each individual note, backing off on air at the end of notes, especially longer, like half notes, whole notes, just really backing off on that air, or just generally not getting a strong sound because they're not putting enough air into the instrument. So first of all, a good way to work on this is to make sure you're breathing correctly. So if you're playing and your shoulders raise up when you breathe in, that's not a good sign. So you definitely don't want to be breathing in and like doing that. That shows that you're really taking shallow breaths and not breathing into your full lung capacity. So really focus on breathing down into your lungs, so kind of down into your belly, and letting your lungs really expand without raising your shoulders. So one way you can practice that is just kind of put your hand on your stomach and feel it expand as you are breathing, or even like on your rib cage, like putting your hands here and feeling that expand. That will help a lot with figuring out how to take those nice deep breaths without creating excess tension. Another way to work on air support is to play long tones. So playing a note as long as you can and just trying to keep your air consistent for as long as you can. A good way to practice long tones is to start as quiet as you can play, crescendo up to as loud as you can play, and then decrescendo back down to as quiet as you can play. This will help you work on keeping that consistent air throughout the whole dynamic range. And it would be great to work on this in all ranges of the instrument too. So high notes, low notes, whatever. So yeah, long tones will help a lot, as well as I suggested before, playing scales slurred and just really focusing on that consistency of air, keeping your sound consistent through the range. All right, so number 3 is going to be tonguing with the middle of your tongue, or really anywhere besides the tip. So when you play, you want to play with the tip of your tongue. So very tip. If you are playing with the middle there, or really anywhere behind the tip, it's gonna create issues. It's gonna be harder to play fast. It's gonna affect the tone a lot. So we'll see if I can do this. That's me playing with the middle of my tongue versus tip. The middle, tip. It's a lot easier to control with the tip. You end up with a lot less of a blatty sound. So when you're practicing, if you first of all just take notice of what part of your tongue you're tonguing with. A lot of people just don't notice until they are asked to pay attention to it. So kind of pay attention to that, identify which part of your tongue you're using, and then if it isn't the tip, try to fix it. So really just practice focusing on using that very tip of your tongue, and play some easy stuff, stuff that you're comfortable with, and just try to build that good habit with the tip of your tongue. All right, so number 4 is similar. It's tonguing on the middle of the reed instead of the tip. So when you're tonguing, you want to use the tip of your tongue to the tip of the reed. So that very tip, you don't want to get like up over the reed, but you just kind of want to get kind of just under that tip. If you're hitting the middle here or anywhere behind the tip, it's gonna create issues with tone. It's gonna make it a lot harder to tongue, especially quickly. So tonguing behind the tip, it's a lot harder to play versus the tip, a lot easier. So if you, again, first identify where on the reed you're tonguing, probably haven't thought about it before. So just kind of think about that, try to figure it out. And if you aren't tonguing the tip of the reed, then go about practicing and trying to correct that habit. Like I said before, just practice easy stuff, try to build that habit so eventually you can play harder things and it's just kind of an automatic. All right. Number 5 is going to be low tongue position. So if you have, if your tongue is too low and your throat is too open, it's going to create, it's going to make the sound go flat, basically. So when you're playing, you want your tongue like you're saying the letter E. So you want it kind of up in the back and then coming down to meet the reed. Low tongue position is going to create this, like I said, sort of flat sound. Versus up in the E position. So again, a lot more control, better tone. That E tongue position is going to make a huge difference, especially with the higher notes, the higher you go. So if that sounds familiar to you, like your high notes are really dropping flat. Think about saying E. That will definitely help you. Just really try to remind yourself of that E tongue position, and that should clear that up. All right, number 6 is too much mouthpiece in your mouth. So this is also pretty common when students are being taught saxophone. They often aren't taught exactly how far they need to go onto the mouthpiece. So my kind of dirty mouthpiece, your teeth should go about here-ish. Definitely not super far. So think of, that's maybe an inch onto the mouthpiece. Versus like if you're too far, the sound is just really hard to control when you have too much mouthpiece. Versus, so yeah, kind of identify if that might be an issue. Just kind of think about where you're usually biting down on the mouthpiece and how much mouthpiece you have in your mouth. That definitely affects the sound. All right, number 7 is biting down too hard. This is definitely common, especially students that might be like really nervous or like just really trying to force out those notes, especially getting into higher range. Students tend to do this more. So biting down too hard is gonna look like, just way too much pressure with the lower lip especially. This really makes the sound go super sharp and just kind of constricts the ability of the reed to vibrate. So see if I can do this. That's like trying to really bite down. So you really want to focus on less pressure with the lower lip, more pressure with the corners going inward. So loosening up that bottom lip as much as you can, really. That allows the reed to vibrate. You don't want to constrict that reed too much. All right, and number 8 is going to be breathing through their nose. So I don't see this one super often, but every once in a while I get a student that is just dead set on always breathing through their nose, and they can't breathe through their mouth when they're playing. This may seem like it's not important, but it definitely makes it a lot harder. If you're breathing through your nose all the time, it's just hard to get a big breath quick enough. So if you're playing something fast and you're trying to, like, you just can't get in enough air that fast through your mouth, or you just can't get enough air in that fast through your nose. So my students who have that issue of breathing through their nose tend to just, like, be constantly breathing, basically. Like, just like taking way too many breaths because they just, like, can't get enough air in through their nose fast enough. So if you have that issue, if that is familiar to you, the main thing that I would recommend doing would be find something to plug your nose with while you're playing. So either probably the best thing would be like for like swimming, one of those nose plugs. So just put that on your nose while you're playing. You're gonna have to figure out how to breathe through your mouth. And basically, you don't want to be, so when breathing through your mouth, you don't want to come like totally off the mouthpiece. You just want to breathe through like the corners. Sort of like that. So just kind of trying to breathe through the corners of your mouth. But yeah, having something to plug your nose will force you to have to do that, and that will definitely help with that issue. All right, so that is 8 of the common bad habits that I've seen through the years of teaching lessons. I hope that was helpful for you and provided some good tips for trying to identify and fix those bad habits. If you would like to study with me privately online, you can email me at coilangie@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, angiecoyle.com, and book your first lesson. I would love to teach you. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.